march of time. Throughout all the world today, in capitals, seaports, and even the most remote cities in distant lands, there may be found the familiar symbols of the American Foreign Service. The flag and the shield which signify that on duty at this post is an officer commissioned to represent the citizens and the government of the United States. In more than 350 widely scattered consulates, legations, and embassies, the Foreign Service officer, whether a consul, a minister, or an ambassador, knows that of all his jobs, the most important is to make friends for his country. Six years ago, when Franklin Roosevelt first announced that the foreign policy of the United States was to be that of the good neighbor among nations, he chose as head of the Department of State and the American Foreign Service an ardent man of peace, Cordell Hull of Carthage, Tennessee. During his term of office, Secretary Hull has seen the violation of the Nine Power Treaty, which guaranteed China's territorial integrity, and the shattering of the Kellogg Pact, which was to outlaw war. And though a man of peace, Cordell Hull was among the first to urge that his nation be prepared to defend itself in the troubled world of today. At the same time, he and his department have been working long and hard to eliminate what he believes to be the fundamental causes of international rivalry and conflict.
Mr. Secretary, what are the United States' aims in foreign policy today?
To maintain peace and a freer flow of international trade is the cardinal principle of our foreign policy. To keep our relations with other countries on an even keel, to prevent crises from breaking out, to remove the causes of friction before they have become serious. These are the constant objectives of the American Foreign Service.
Today, of all New Deal appointees, hard-working 67-year-old Cordell Hull is the one man who has received the widest approval of the American people. In every poll of public opinion, he has been voted the most able of the President's advisors. To his credit, in a period of increasing international mistrust, Secretary Hull has concluded reciprocal trade agreements with 20 nations of the world. In the rising tide of world nationalism, which has already caused 3 wars and 2 bloodless conquests, he has not only kept his nation out of trouble, but has sought to heighten its prestige. To recruit for the State Department the ablest young men he can find is the job of Howland Shaw, Chief of Personnel. A career in the American Foreign Service is open to every citizen between the ages of 21 and 35, but he must first pass a stiff written examination. Less than 10% survive to face the ordeal of an oral examination, in which the Foreign Service veterans have a chance to look over the candidate, study his character and personality. Though he may have made a perfect score in the written test, he will be eliminated if he fails to measure up to standard.
Mr. Donovan, if you had a question in international law to look up, what books would you consult?
Moore's International Law Digest and Hyde's International Law.
Out of as many as 1,000 applicants, only 25 hand-picked men are accepted each year. When his commission as a vice consul is embossed with the Great Seal of the United States, the successful candidate is eligible to represent his government. At some not too distant consular post, under the eye of an experienced officer, the new consul begins his probationary service. Here he tastes routine, signs the documents and issues the permits without which ships cannot clear with their cargoes. Here he discovers that the Foreign Service officer must be sympathetic with the trials of the American tourist. He must listen patiently to scores of imaginary grievances, but be ready to act promptly in any small emergency.
My wife and I have been traveling on the same passport. Just before we got to the border, my wife got off the train. The train started up and left her behind with no passport and no money.
May I see your passport? Now there's no need to worry, Mr. Edwards.
Ordered back to Washington when his trial term ends, he must next attend the State Department's postgraduate training school, and for several months study diplomatic procedure and the art of protocol. And from this school, he graduates to a post of his own, a fledgling diplomat who may someday be his nation's ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary.
As Foreign Service officers, you are sample Americans, and many people abroad will think better or worse of the United States because of what you are and what you do. I wish you the best of all possible luck at your new posts.
As a representative of one of the greatest and richest nations on earth, the young diplomat is the inheritor of a long and distinguished tradition, a tradition for which men before him have given their lives. In his new post, the young Foreign Service officer has the authority and the responsibility necessary to maintain the prestige of his government. He is charged by law with granting or denying the privilege of emigration to those seeking a new life in the United States. Whenever he learns that an American citizen has been summarily deprived of his rights, it is his job to demand in the name of his government that these rights be restored. And if American citizens abroad are threatened by war or disaster, it is the consul who must plan their evacuation.
How many refugees are coming on board at Alicante?
115, Captain. And then tomorrow, some 200 more will be waiting for you at Valencia.
During the past year, in Europe and in the Orient, the U.S. Navy has cooperated with the Foreign Service in removing thousands of refugees to a place of safety. Today, when Washington chooses its men for promotion, one factor weighs heavily in the young diplomat's favor: his performance as a good neighbor.
There's a lot of malaria at your post, isn't there? I hope you didn't get it yourself.
No, I was lucky and didn't get it. But I did meet the doctor who's in charge of the anti-malarial campaign. He talked to me about his work, and I was able to get him some information from our own public health service. That was the beginning of a very interesting friendship, for through him, I met a number of very interesting people. I think I was of some assistance to them, and they certainly helped me to understand the country.
Good for you. You have the right idea.
Upon the shoulders of Secretary Hull and his undersecretaries rest responsibilities involving the security of every U.S. citizen at home and abroad. In every troubled area in the world, the State Department is in constant communication with Foreign Service officers in the field. Men trained to report what is being thought, said, and done abroad. What may happen in the future likely to affect U.S. interests. Accredited to Berlin, one center of the world's anxiety, is a veteran career diplomat, Ambassador Hugh Wilson. In Rome, at the other end of the Rome-Berlin axis, career Ambassador William Phillips reports on the day-by-day developments in fascist Italy.